Welcome to Marshall Remodel. I'm Paul, and on today's show, we're going to talk about post-frame construction. I've been getting a lot of questions that I think I can answer in this video. The series I'm doing right now is the MAD 30 build series, which is a post-frame home that I'm sitting at right now. It is actually my home that I'm constructing, and I'm going to go through in this video what post-frame construction is, what the basics of it are, how it compares to stick frame construction. What are some pros and cons to it? Is it right for you? Is it not right for you? And I'm going to go through why I chose it. So let's jump into it. So the first thing you should do if you're considering post-frame construction is go to your local county where you plan on building and see if it's even allowed. In a lot of places in this country, post-frame construction for the use of a residence is not allowed. Where I came from in Illinois, I lived out in the country, and the county just wouldn't allow it. And I think that's from a lack of knowledge of post-frame and the lack of residents that are actually built using post-frame construction. It's definitely an up-and-coming thing, and I think we're going to see a turn in that. But to save yourself some time, you might want to just go ahead and check with your local county to see if they'll even allow you to have a residence with that kind of construction. The second thing you need to consider is if you have to secure a mortgage for post-frame construction, you need to seek out a bank and find one that will do an in-house loan. If you have a good relationship with your banker, you probably have a good chance. The problem with getting a loan for a post-frame home is there is no secondary market for those mortgages, so banks can't go out and find the best deal and sell that mortgage to another company. So most of the time it has to be an in-house loan. So that's the second thing you need to think about when you're going to build a post-frame construction. Now in my case, I knew that was going to be a problem, so I saved up to build my home with cash, and I got a mortgage for my land. So that's how I dealt with that. But that's just something that's obviously going to be a pretty big deal if you can't secure a mortgage for your post-frame construction. Another thing to consider is resale, and I think this is going to change in the course of the next 5 to 10 years. But resale might be a little more difficult because, again, there's just not a lot of comparisons for banks to lend money for them. So they're kind of scared to loan money to people. So that might hurt the sale of your home. It might lower the price a little bit. In my case, I'm not really worried about it because we're building this house to stay here. Obviously, if that changes, I feel like it's going to be a nice enough place. And the area we are in this country, it's definitely on the rise, and there's getting to be more knowledge about post-frame homes, so I don't feel like there's going to be a problem selling it. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to build it and you think you might sell within 5 years, that might be something you want to consider. Maybe do a little research in your area to see if it's something that is harder to sell. Maybe check with some realtors and stuff like that. All right, the next thing I want to talk about with post-frame building is the actual construction of it. And I've been getting a lot of questions on will this building or home withstand wind and weather? And my answer to that is yes. These are engineered buildings, and based on where you are in the country, they are engineered to withstand the requirements that are set forth for construction. So in my area, I believe these buildings are engineered to withstand 90 mile an hour consistent wind, which is pretty good in this area. Now, if you're in southern Florida, they might not even allow this at all because they might not be able to build these strong enough to withstand that. I don't know. That's something you're going to have to check with your local area. I know in the Midwest, these buildings have been used for tractor storage and farm use for years and years and years, and they are engineered. The trusses, the posts, the whole building is engineered to withstand the weather that and the climate that you live in. So yes, they will stand up to the weather where you live. Now, if a tornado comes and runs right over it, it's not going to stand, nor would any other building unless it's built of complete concrete. It's just as sturdy and as strong as a stick frame home, and I don't think you have to worry about it being able to withstand the weather. Now, understanding that when you go to build a post frame building, this is the first one I've ever built from scratch. Now, I've put metal on them before and stuff like that. I wanted to build one for myself before I built any barn or post frame home for anyone else, so I could work out all of the little nuances and little things you learn the first time you do something. And I'm confident that this house is going to be very, very strong and very durable. But when you're thinking about having somebody build it, you want to find somebody that is knowledgeable about post frame construction and that is going to build it the way they're supposed to be built, using the proper nails, all that kind of stuff. So just keep that in mind. Now, going into the actual construction of a post frame building, there's basically 6 components to build the structure. You have your footings, you have your posts or columns, you have your girts, which are the boards that attach all your posts together, you have your trusses, and then you have your purlins, and then you have your steel. Now, when you frame up your building, it's not going to have a ton of strength. It's going to have a lot of flexibility until you put that steel on it. Once you put that steel on it, that locks it all together. And if you go and talk to a post frame supplier, every one of them is different, and it's important that you find out the specifications for each specific post frame builder and engineer, because their specifications might be a little different than somebody else's, which I found out with my roof steel, which I'll talk to you about in a later video on the Mad County Build Series. So let's talk about the footings. I think there's 4 or 5 ways you can put footings down. Typically, these buildings were originally built where you just drilled a hole in the ground or dug a hole in the ground. You want to get below the frost line. Where I'm at, it's 42 inches. I try to get mine 48 to 4 to 5 feet basically in the ground. But typically the way these buildings are built, they just took the post, they put a round concrete pad at the bottom of the hole and set the post in the hole and push the dirt back in, and that is what holds your post. So that's one method. Another method that was used quite a bit when these first started being built is they would put a footing pad at the bottom, put the post in, and then they would fill it up with cement. That is definitely something that is not done that much anymore. And I would not recommend that way out of any of them, because moisture can get in between that concrete and that post. That post is going to shrink and expand with weather and humidity and water, and over time it's gonna rot that post pretty quickly. The third way is a permacolumn. A permacolumn is basically a post, whatever size post you have, but the bottom 4 or 5 feet of it is concrete. It's a concrete that's precast, and it's supposedly like 5 to 6 times stronger than normal concrete, and then the post attaches to the top of it. These are used a lot for companies that want to come in, they want to dig the hole, they want to get their posts in the ground and get building right away. They're a great option. They keep your post out of the ground. It doesn't slow the builder down at all, having to wait for the concrete to set up before he can start building. Another way that's becoming pretty popular is plastic sleeves, and these are sleeves that go over the post where it is in the ground, so it protects it from moisture and the elements. And the last one is what I used, is pouring footings, round footings, and then putting a wet set bracket which your post attaches to, and that keeps your post out of the ground, and it is an extremely strong connection. And if I was to build this building, build a building or a post frame home for somebody, I would definitely recommend that. And I don't even know if I would do it any other way, because it is a little bit more labor, because you have to wait a day before you can start building, but it's a pretty structurally sound. You can guarantee your post isn't going to rot, and they're pretty beefy. So if I was going to give you any recommendation, I would say pour round footings with wet set brackets. That's my opinion. Take it for what it's worth. The second part of a post frame building is going to be your columns or your posts. So the way a post frame building works, the posts, so either a 6x6 post or a laminated column, is used for the strength of these buildings, and the girts attached to these posts or columns, and that supports the weight of the walls and the roof. So all that weight from the roof and the walls is transferred into those posts, down into your footing, and into the ground. That's how these buildings support themselves. Laminated columns, in my opinion, are the best way to go. They're 2x6s primarily. They're laminated together, either a 3-ply or 4-ply, depending on how tall your posts are. The great thing about laminated columns is they're extremely straight and true. They're easy to work with. A lot of times they'll put metal reinforcement in them in between plates to even strengthen them even more. And then there's huge bolts that go through your wet set bracket, if you choose that bolt them together, and they're extremely strong. Now we'll talk about girts. You'll see a lot of post frame builders in this country, they use 2x4 girts versus 2x6 girts. I would definitely recommend 2x6 girts, and I think most of the upper end post frame builders use 2x6 girts. The bottom girt should be a treated. I used 2x12s on mine that extend down below the ground, and we'll talk into more about that bottom part of your building in a little bit. But so the girts are what tie all the posts together and keep all your spacing, your trusses. And trusses are one thing that are awesome on these post frame buildings. Your posts are typically spaced at 8 feet on center. I think 8 is pretty standard. I think that's a good spacing. It worked for me. Now a lot of these builders or engineers, when they design your buildings, your sidewall posts will be spaced at 8 feet, and then a lot of times your end wall will be spaced at a greater distance. I wanted mine all 8 foot on center, so I requested that when I had my building designed. So my posts are 8 foot on center the entire way around my house and my garage. But as far as the trusses go, with post frame buildings, you can get free span trusses up. I think they all go up over 100 feet, and obviously when you get up to that high, they're going to be double trusses, and they're going to be giant trusses. But you can free span. The biggest building I've ever seen free span is like 80 something feet, and that's one of the reasons I chose post frame, is because I wanted a really open concept home. I wanted a really high ceiling in one part of my house, and I could span the full 48 feet with my truss with no load-bearing walls. and it wasn't an issue. So that's another great thing about their trusses, is they're engineered to free span whatever the width of your building is. And typically those trusses will sit on your column or your truss or your post. I like using the laminated columns for the fact that you can take that one of the middle 2x6s out, and you can set your truss right in the middle of that column, and it sits right on top of the post, and it just makes for a really secure connection, strong connection. You put some ring shank nails in there, and then you run a through bolt through there, and that is really strong, and you're going to have it'd take a really strong wind to rip those trusses off of your columns. And then on top of your trusses, you'll run purlins. And if you have 8 foot on center trusses, your purlins are going to be 2x4s, and they're going to be set on end. And they have to be set on end at 8 foot spacing so they have the strength. And typically they're 2 foot on center, and then your steel gets screwed into your purlins. Now, if you've seen a building with the purlins laid flat, it's probably because in between the 8 foot on center posts, they've put another truss. So they have headers that go from post to post, and then they set another truss in the middle. So if you get down to 4 foot on center on your trusses, I think that's when you can run your 2x4s flat. It makes it a little easier screwing your steel in and hitting your purlins, but 8 foot on center is plenty strong. I had some other questions about the windows. How does the building support these windows? So basically how that works, you can see the top of my framing is screwed into this wall girt on the top, and then on the bottom I added one, and the bottom framing is screwed in to the bottom one. And then you have these boards that you patch in, and that's all. This whole window frame is screwed to all the girts. So the weight of this window is mainly carried by this girt and this girt, and then it's transferred over into the posts. And if you have a window with a nailing flange, use screws, so that window is screwed in all the way around. And those girts are on end, so they're extremely strong. So the weight of those windows is transferred through those girts into the posts and then into the ground. I think some of the benefits of a post frame building are, one, if you build it like they were originally designed, there's less material. Like I said, there's no sheathing on the roof or the sides. You can still wrap the house to get that wind kept from getting into your house, and there's less material. You don't have to have a continuous footing if you don't want to, and there's a lot of money saved in that. With that being said, you can add any of those features into this if you want. If you feel like, I feel like that'd be better, there's nothing to say you can't add that specific thing into your house, your post frame home. That's one thing that's awesome about it. Another benefit is how fast you can close these up. If you had a couple guys, now I did this by myself, but if you had a couple guys to build your building, you can get them enclosed very fast because you're not doing any of the internal framing until after the fact. You can build the complete outside shell of your house, your walls, your roof, get all your doors and windows in, and then after that's all done, you can move inside and do all the framing, all the plumbing, all that kind of good stuff. So that is a huge factor if you are trying to build a house yourself, and then you have as much time as you want to take. It's very difficult when you have a family and another job and you're trying to build your own home. It takes a lot of time. And I will tell you, you think something takes a certain amount of time, you might as well just double that, and in some cases even triple it, because things don't always go as smooth as you think they should, and some things are just time consuming. So that was a big factor for me, being able to just get this framed up and then work on the inside when I can. The framing on the inside, there's lots of different options for that in the walls. As far as the internal framing, the walls that are going to be in between the exterior walls, that they're going to be framed up typically the same way they would in a stick frame house. They're going to be 2x4, 16 on center walls, and I will be going through the different ways you can frame up a wall later on in my Mad 30 series when I start framing. I'm going to frame my garage with bookshelf girts, 2x6 bookshelf girts, because I'm going to be putting steel in there. But in the house, I'm going to be doing something different, and I'll explain all that. But you have lots of options once you get inside on how to frame your house. Another pro for me is I love a house that is as maintenance free as possible. I always try to stay away from decks. I always try to stay away from wood windows, wood siding, anything that has the potential to rot or something I have to maintain. This house is a steel. It's all covered in steel. I have all vinyl windows. My wraparound porch is all concrete, so there's going to be very little maintenance that I have to do. I will probably power wash the house once a year just because I like to keep it nice and clean and looking nice. But outside of that, there's hardly any maintenance on this house, and that's big for me. When you have a family, the last thing you need is more things to maintain on your house. So that's another great benefit of a post frame home when you use steel, is that it's pretty much maintenance free. The reason I chose to build mine the way I did is because I wanted those cost savings in the sheathing on the wall, the sheathing on the roof. I didn't want to have to spend the extra money on the footing. I didn't want a basement. There was lots of concerns. If you only have column footings, how do you protect the outside of your house from rodents and other things burrowing under your concrete? And I covered that in one of my videos. We'll jump to that right now. But what I did is I took rolled aluminum, I think it was 24-inch rolled aluminum, and before I backfilled, I wrapped my house, and then I took that aluminum, attached it to my bottom girt, and ran it down about 15 inches into the ground. And then I backfilled around it. So that will keep any rodent, any varmints from burrowing underneath your building. It's a pretty cheap insurance to make sure nothing's getting under your building, because you will see in post frame barns and stuff, a lot of animals will burrow under that bottom girt. As far as cons of a post frame home, I can't really think of a ton. Maybe one would be the difficulty of putting up steel if you have never dealt with steel. Making sure that they're your home is waterproof around windows and where trims meet, and all that can be done pretty easily with a little experience, with a little knowledge. There are some guys out there that do a really good job explaining it. I think R&R Buildings is probably the best as far as waterproofing your building. I've learned a lot of tips and tricks from him as far as waterproofing my windows and stuff like that. Like I said, I put up a lot of steel on buildings, but none with windows. So this is the first time I had to deal with windows, and I dove right in. As you can see, my house has a million windows, but I found it fairly easy once I got going. And I'm really confident that this home's going to be waterproof. I mean, we've had lots of rains and snows, and there's been no leaking inside the house. I mean, nothing's done inside, so I'd be able to see no water on the floor, no water coming through the windows. And if you go around and look at post frame buildings, and if they have windows in them, if you look at a lot of them, you'll see that the wood is stained from leaking. So you want to make sure whatever builder you're picking, that they do a really good job, and they take pride in making sure that they're doing that trim right, and that they're sealing your building up, because there isn't a ton of builders out there that build post frame homes. there's getting to be more. So make sure that might be a deciding factor for you. You might not be able to find somebody to build your home where you are, and that might be a deciding factor whether you can build one or not. But I would definitely suggest, if whoever you hire, make sure they have some references. Make sure you can see their work, and they can do a good job. All right. Well, I hope this video has helped answer some questions on what exactly post frame construction is versus stick frame. Hopefully it'll help you make a decision whether it's right for you, whether it's wrong for you. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel. If you're interested in post frame construction, I got a complete build series going on a post frame home and garage right now, that I cover basically every step in the construction process. Just wrapping up the outside, and we'll be moving in shortly, and there's going to be a lot of exciting things going on in there. I'm going to go through how to finish everything: the plumbing, electrical, HVAC, building an upstairs, so all that framing will be included, a loft, just a lot of good information that's going to be coming down the pipe in the next 6-7 months. So stay tuned. Don't forget to subscribe, and hopefully you enjoyed this video.